In today's show, Damian Lillard is suddenly a free agent. Is it time for a homecoming in Rip City? Or is that just nonsense? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen. Coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, we're talking Damian Lillard, who suddenly finds himself a free agent in one of a truly stunning move of the offseason. Damian Lillard was waived by the Milwaukee Bucks, and now he is going to be paid handsomely the full $113 million owed to him on his contract over the next 5 years, and he can go pursue other opportunities with that security and that money still coming to him. True free agency for him. We'll talk about all that. It has so many implications for the Blazers. Not only the sort of the obvious reunion stuff, but also like the Blazers own some out picks from the Bucks, and the Bucks' decision to quadruple down, triple down on this particular era with Giannis Antetokounmpo has some ramifications for the Blazers. We can get into all of that in today's program. Why the Bucks did this, Damian Lillard's potential return to Portland, and why I, quite frankly, do not think it is the right time, and it's a bad idea in the moment. Now is not the time. We'll get into all that. Plus, we'll talk about what this means for the Bucks. Let me start here. I'll bring you into my day. You are listening to Wednesday, July 2nd's program, Tuesday morning. I wake up. I've got a 2.5-year-old. I wake up with my 2.5-year-old, and I am doing what you do, right? I'm reading books. I'm playing with stuffed animals. Trying to get her to eat the smallest amount of breakfast that any human can possibly eat. And she knows, my kid knows basketball players because her dad is, I'm her father, right? I've poisoned her a little bit. And she says to me, "What's daddy looking at?" I show her a picture of what I'm looking at on my phone. She said, "Why daddy looking at a surprise picture of Damian Lillard?" Yeah, that's what was happening. It was 7:30 in the morning and daddy was looking at a surprise picture of Damian Lillard because the Bucks on Tuesday morning, out of nowhere, decided to waive and stretch Damian Lillard. This is before 8 a.m. comes out on the West Coast. That all of a sudden, Damian Lillard, in a stunner, hits free agency because the Bucks are retooling and they need to create enough cap space by waiving and stretching Damian Lillard in order to sign Miles Turner away from the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers and Bucks kind of have bad blood over the last couple of seasons. And now all of a sudden, 9 days removed from Game 7 of the NBA Finals, Miles Turner, the longest tenured Pacer, who spent a decade almost getting traded by the Pacers, has decided, like, you mess with me, I might mess with you a little bit. Don't F with the game. And Turner has agreed to a free agent contract deal with the Milwaukee Bucks. But in order to acquire Turner, there is some massive seismic stuff Milwaukee has to do. And all of a sudden, Damian Lillard is a free agent. Lillard is owed $113 million over the next 2 seasons. He will turn 35 on July 15th. This was always going to be a risk. And this contract is the extension that Joe Cronin signed Damian Lillard to in 2021. This isn't Bucks money. This is Blazers money to some extent. This is all Blazers related. We'll get there. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Joe Cronin signs in 2021 after taking over, agrees to sign Damian Lillard to this big old contract extension. 2 years, $113 million. It was just going to kick in this season. This was the beginning of that extension that Damian Lillard signed with the Blazers. Of course, he eventually asked for a trade, and they traded him to the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks are going to pay him all of that money, just in a very stunning way. Dame gets the Bucks will request waivers on Dame, which means they'll eat his contract and send him to free agency, and they will use the stretch provision to stretch his contract so the cap hit isn't a singular year, but it's over several seasons. The way the stretch provision works is that it is for how many years are left on the contract, it's double that plus one. Damian Lillard is owed $113 million over the next 2 seasons, which means for 5 straight years, Damian Lillard will be getting paid $22.5 million to not pay for the Bucks. And it means that Damian Lillard hits free agency with $113 million coming to him till his 40th birthday, until freaking the end of the 2030 season. Woo-hoo! And now Dame gets to figure it out. But it's not that simple. The reason that Dame got waived is because he had Achilles surgery in May, came back from deep vein thrombosis in his calf to return to games 3 and 4 of the playoffs with the Milwaukee Bucks, and then sustained an Achilles tear in game 4 of their first round playoff series against yes, those Pacers. And Dame had surgery in May, and he's fairly likely to miss the entire season. Now, he could come back sooner, but like the safe money is that Damian Lillard does not play in the 2025-2026 season based on when this injury happened. You know, I think the fast end on guys returning from this is something like 8 months. So yeah, there's a world where he comes back before that. The long end is a year or and some change, and typically we see guys, even if they do come back on the early end, like not regain their form for a little bit longer than that. So it might just make sense for Damian Lillard to miss an entire year. But because Dame was going to miss an entire year, the Milwaukee Bucks, facing this uncertainty with Giannis Antetokounmpo, said, okay, we're going to do something drastic. Like, drastic. Pretty stunning. Waiving Dame, using the stretch provision to extend the cap hit over 5 seasons. Take $22.5 million of dead money, as they call it, of just like money that you owe someone that isn't a basketball player on your books. It's about 15% of the salary cap moving forward. 15% of the salary cap is like a high-end bench player. That's like a decent bench player. For context here, Jabari Smith Jr., the freaking 3rd pick in the 2022 NBA draft, is making less money on in terms of percentage of the cap on an annual basis on his 5-year extension than Damian Lillard will be making on his stretch contract provision. Holy heck. This is a big move. And what it means is that Damian Lillard enters free agency with full choice of where he goes next and no real need to get paid wherever he ends up. Because the money's already coming to him. He's already getting paid. He can truly choose his destination, choose where he wants to be. And anyone that has talked to anybody who knows Dame over the last couple years knows that one of the places he truly wants to be is Portland, Oregon. In fact, when he found out the news that he had been waived by the Milwaukee Bucks in a stunning turn of events, Damian Lillard was in Portland, Oregon, because that's where he lives in the offseason. This is his home. So now that Damian Lillard has agency to choose his next destination, you are asking yourself, why not here? Why not back? Why not a reunion? I quite frankly don't think it's time. This is bad timing. It's not now. I want to talk about why I don't think it's now in the second segment. Join me there, and I will do just that and kind of lay out why I think right now is not the time for Damian Lillard to rejoin the Portland Trail Blazers, even if that's what he wants to do ultimately. First, though, let's talk Monarch Money. You ever look at your bank account and think, like, where did my money go? Where hath it gone? Because you're doing things. You are spending money, but you're also trying to save some as well. Whether you're planning for a big purchase or just trying to grow your savings, Monarch Money can help you take care of that cash and put you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control of your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you are also building your wealth. You can track like specific categories where you're spending. So like how much you're spending on groceries, how much you're spending on dining out, how much you're spending on subscriptions for various media properties. You can see like where you want to cut back, where you're feeling like you're hitting your goals. And also everything is in one app to make it easier. So if you have a mortgage or if you have investment accounts to go along with your savings and your checking accounts, it's all going to be in one place right there with Monarch Money. And if you share finances with someone, it can help both of you stay on the same page at the same time. Plus, you can track financial goals, both short-term and long-term goals in the same bucket with Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, and the code is LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. All right. Damian Lillard's a free agent. He can choose wherever he wants to go. And the reporting from Chris Haynes, at least, is that Miami is somewhat ironically at the top of Dame's wish list. But Portland should obviously be in a team to keep an eye on. Yeah, duh. Mark Spears of ESPN and Anscape says that there are upwards of 5 or 6 teams who have reached out to Damian Lillard, and he's ecstatic to have this choice of his destination, because he can choose where he wants to go, and that the expectation is that he will sign a 2-year deal with someone and allow him the sort of rehab season in 25-26 and then the comeback season in 26-27 when he is a 36-year-old. Let me just be 100% clear about my position on this. It's not time. A reunion with the Trailblazers eventually makes sense. And I totally understand the impetus and the impulse for wanting Damian Lillard to come home. You, dear Blazer fan, depending on how old you are, but this generation of Blazers fans, this is your most important Trailblazer. This is the most important Trailblazer, even after you could argue that Damian Lillard hasn't been a Trailblazer for 2 consecutive seasons, and he remains, to this day, the most important Trailblazer in the NBA. I don't even think that's controversial. I think he spent 2 seasons playing for another team as the most important Trailblazer in the NBA. I understand the impulse. I think nostalgia is both toxic and calming. It gives you some sort of grounding to feel that reunion. Also, Dame's good. Certainly coming off this Achilles, there is an uncertainty of his overall impact, right? Because you just don't know. You just don't know what he's going to be like on the back half, right? It's a tough injury to come back from. Although I do think like in the sort of modern medicine world, we've seen players come back and be pretty freaking good, Kevin Durant among them. All-time greats have a way of just overcoming this stuff, and Damian Lillard is an all-time great. Dude's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He'll be a first-ballot Hall of Famer when this all is said and done. He is on the Trailblazers Mount Rushmore. Even if you think he is the 3rd greatest Trailblazer of all time, the dude is on Mount Rushmore. He's on Mount Blazers more, and there is no logical conversation that places him anywhere else. But it's not time. It's not the time for it. It doesn't make sense right now. And it doesn't make sense right now because of something I talked about on the show yesterday. The Blazers have kind of prioritized roster clarity with their moves this offseason. They traded Anthony Simons because Simons, if he was on the team, one, they're going to have to pay him to continue to be on the team. And two, it's like, because he's the longest tenured player, because of his age and what was eventually going to be his contract, it was going to be harder politically to move him to a bench role. They traded for Jrue Holiday, who's 35 years old. There is a world in which Jrue Holiday is hard to bench in his first season with the Blazers, but if he continues forward, there is a world where bench is the wrong word, to move him to a backup role, a reserve role. It just becomes easier. It becomes simpler. Waiving DeAndre Ayton outright. Waiving has become a real thing in the new CBA, where it's just like, the poison of contracts that are basically impossible to trade under this new CBA. You just have to eat the money and run. The Grizzlies did it with Cole Anthony. The Blazers did it with DeAndre Ayton, and now the Bucks did it, the largest buyout in league history, with Damian Lillard. But by trading Anthony Simons for Jrue Holiday and allowing for like a player that just like fits better basketball wise with the young guards, Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, and also is like easier to move into a reserve role because of his age and perhaps declining skill set, and by just outright waiving DeAndre Ayton and creating space for Donovan Clingan and Young Hansen to play real minutes in Clingan in year one and then Hansen in year two. Like, by making those choices and creating those lanes for those guys to play sort of like very easily, right? Where it's like, even if the young guards Scoot and Shaedon don't start, there's no like controversy over their minutes. They can still play 30 minutes a night. It's simple. Like, they've created a simple path for that to happen. Maybe not the best path, but certainly a simple one. They've prioritized roster clarity. They've prioritized a place where they can create, where they don't have to chase the postseason, where they can create natural and easy evaluation situations for their young players to figure out what they have. Because they haven't done that in the last 2 years. They haven't created these clean evaluation situations. Now they've done that. If the evaluation becomes like, yeah, these dudes are really good, let's roll, then you make decisions from there. And if the evaluation becomes these dudes aren't good, like, press the reset button to some extent. At least you have a clear path to do those evaluations. And bringing Damian Lillard into the mix, it totally reclutters the roster. Because Damian Lillard is, he's probably not going to play this season, so it's hard to know. But like, he would be the best guard on the roster. That adds a little bit of complication, not because you don't want good players, but because if you were trying to create a space where to figure out what you had, bringing back Damian Lillard into the fold is messy because, one, he's better than those guys, or at least has been. And two, when Dame was here last, he was the most powerful voice in the organization before he left. The phrase I've used is MFK. That stands for the MF King of the organization. That's what he was. Like, he had an outsized voice in so many different things. For example, the first move Joe Cronin ever made was to sign Keldon Blevins to a 10-day contract. First move he ever made. First on his ledger. Signed Damian Lillard's cousin to a 10-day contract. Like, Dame had an outsized voice here. He was the most important player on the roster. He was the most important player in the organization. He was the most powerful person in the organization. He had a very, very, very powerful voice. If you bring him back here, he's not Scoot Henderson's backup. He's nobody's backup. He's Damian freaking Lillard making his reunion. You are committing a lot to him. And you could say, great, that's what I want to do. I love that. And again, I get that impulse, I get that impetus, but because of the moves they've made over the last 10 days, over the last week, creating this space for roster clarity, it goes against all of their other decisions to bring Damian Lillard back. I'm not against it forever and forever. I'm against it in July of 2025. I'm against it this season. I do not think it makes sense for where they are. I think it clutters the build. I think it clutters the post-Dame era by making the post-Dame era the Dame era. But I will say this. I've talked to people who know Dame very, very well, and he wants to come back here. He wants to come back here. This is where, like I said, he found the news out in Portland, Oregon, because that's where his kids live and where his extended family still lives and where he spends his summers because it's home to him. He wants to come back here. Speaking with people that know Dame very, very well, the plan is for him to come back here eventually. Don't get it twisted. That is on his mind. That is his goal. That is his plan. But it doesn't make sense for the team right now because of where they are and the decisions they've made to get here. I think it is very reasonable for you, dear listener, to disagree with everything I just said in the last 10 minutes. I'm not even trying to really convince you of that. I'm just trying to lay out my logic. I don't really think they should do it. It doesn't make sense now. Figure out what you got. Because, first of all, Dame's not going to play next season, so making this commitment adds this sort of unnecessary clutter that doesn't even help with the basketball stuff. There's no financial burden to it. He'll probably sign for the minimum. He's getting paid $22.5 million to not play for the Bucks. But I would assume Miami's in the mix based on the reporting from Chris Haynes. I would assume that the Blazers are in the mix, at least in theory, but I don't think it makes sense to them right now at all. I just quite frankly don't, it's not the time. What I want to talk about in the third segment is one, shout out to the Bucks. This was a freaking bold move and they keep going at it. Super duper mega thumbs down to the Pacers, you freaking cowards. And the Bucks picks might get a little bit juicier after this move. Let's talk about the sort of ramifications of the non-Dame reunion stuff and what this move means for the Blazers, because they have some out picks from the Bucks, and the Bucks are really doing something. Join me in that third segment, won't ya? All right, still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. First of all, shout out to the Milwaukee Bucks. Every time that it looks like things are going to go south with Giannis Antetokounmpo, they do something rash. They really go for it. First, they mortgaged their future and traded all their future picks to get Drew Holiday. That one paid off. They won a championship. Then when that era of the Bucks seemed to have kind of hit a wall, they mortgaged their future once again and traded all their picks and Drew Holiday to get Damian Lillard. And then when Damian Lillard blew out his Achilles, leading to this uncertain time and maybe a chance where tons of speculation that Giannis Antetokounmpo would ask out, they freaking decided to pay Damian Lillard $22.5 million a year over 5 seasons to create enough cap space to sign totally talented center Miles Turner, because they were going to lose Brook Lopez in free agency, and having a stretch 5 is incredibly important for the Giannis Antetokounmpo plan, and they found basically the best one available. Holy heck. Every time they go for it. But this is a lot. I think Giannis alone in the current state of the Eastern Conference gets you something like the 6th seed. I think the Bucks will be the 6th-ish seed in the East. But their roster's not very good. Something like Ryan Rollins, Gary Trent Jr., Giannis, Kyle Kuzma, and Miles Turner. I mean, you can't. I don't think you can win a championship. I don't think you can make an Eastern Conference Finals with that group. I just don't think the roster's good enough. But I will say this, out of respect, if you weren't going to actively trade Giannis Antetokounmpo, pressing every button you can in order to improve the roster, and this is a drastic one, I got a lot of respect for that. As someone who covered the Damian Lillard era closely here in a variety of positions, it's like the Blazers never did this. They never did something rash and maybe irresponsible to say, we'll do our absolute best to build you a roster around our sort of like, iconic franchise talent come hell or high water. They didn't do that. They built some good teams. I think the team that Neil O'Shea built in the 2018-19 season rocked. I think that was a very, very good team that he built very, very well, coming off a really brutal season that he probably should have got fired for, quite frankly, but he didn't get fired, and he built a heater. He built a great team. But it wasn't the all-in stuff. It wasn't these crazy risks. It wasn't they throw it all in the pot and see what happens. The Bucks have done that on 3 separate occasions for Giannis. Respect. In complete disrespect to the Indiana Pacers. I understand that Tyrese Halliburton also blew out his Achilles, and he's going to miss the entire season, but the reporting suggests that basically the Pacers didn't want to go into the tax to become a luxury tax team in order to retain Miles Turner. And that was the sticking point. They wanted to get him at a number that kept them below the tax line. And Herb Simon is a coward for that. That's coward stuff. And if you do coward stuff, you don't win in this league. If you're going to win in the NBA, you spend. The OKC is going to eventually have to spend for this roster. They just gave a fat contract to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and you better believe that J-Dub and Chet are getting theirs too. The Pacers, I understand not wanting to be a tax team this coming season, particularly because they're not going to be that good. But the unwillingness to pay Miles Turner a little bit more money and go into the tax and then just say, okay, we'll figure it out later. That's coward stuff. That's bad ownership. I've talked about that in regards to the Blazers changing ownership. A willingness to spend when you're good is a mark of a good owner. That's coward stuff. I do not like it. I do not like it from Herb Simon, the owner of the Indiana Pacers. The other thing I want to talk about here is, and this is an important one, is that the Bucks have some out picks owed to the Blazers. The Blazers have a swap with the Bucks in 2028. In order to enact that swap, they need to make the playoffs in one of the next 2 seasons, in 26 or 27. If they don't, that swap will get nullified because they won't. If you don't have your pick. If they don't have the pick if they don't convey the pick to the Bulls and they don't have access to it, then it's a swap. So the Blazers owe a future pick to the Chicago Bulls from an incredibly hubristic Larry Nance trade. That was actually after the heater in the 2018-19 season when Neil O'Shea made an incredibly hubristic trade to the Chicago Bulls that included a lottery protected pick that if the Blazers make the playoffs, they'll convey the pick to the Bulls. But if they don't make the playoffs in 26 or 27, they'll still owe the Bulls a pick, and they cannot enact that swap unless they have conveyed that pick to the Bulls. That's the basic. That is the basics of it. The Blazers have an unprotected of sorts pick in 2029 to the Bucks, except that they've traded a portion of that. They have their own pick, the Celtics pick, and the 2029 Bucks pick, but the middle of those picks will be going to the Washington Wizards as part of the Denny deal, and then the Blazers have a 2030 pick swap with the Bucks. And I will say this: there is a point post Giannis where the Bucks are going to be a mess. They're not going to have any picks. They're not going to have any future picks. They're going to those are all going to be melted away. Or like they're going to have, the swaps, they still have access to their picks, but they don't have control of their picks to improve the roster. And they'll still be paying Damian Lillard through the 2030 season, $22.5 million, which is like 15, and then like decreasing 13-ish% of the cap projected. There's a chance that 2030 swap, that the Bucks are a mess. There's a chance that by 2029, when the Blazers have an unprotected pick from the Bucks owed to them, although they will have to give one of their picks to the Wizards, there's a chance the Bucks are a mess. 2028 seems close enough that they'll still be relatively competitive, and Giannis will still be young enough, and maybe they'll continue to mortgage their future for the present and all those times. But I do think the Bucks picks got juicier. But they also I would say in general, swaps aren't super, super duper valuable, right? Because you just, the stars have to align in a nice way. Sometimes they're incredibly valuable, other times they aren't, right? They're hard to know, particularly as like we sit here in 2025, like what's going to become of the Blazers and Bucks in 2030, right? Like it's hard to know. But what there could happen is that because the Bucks have super duper mortgaged their future and because they've eaten all this Damian Lillard money and decided all this, there's a time when they do decide to tear it down, and trading back for their own picks from the Blazers becomes even more imperative. And I think that's where the value is. And because the Bucks made a relatively short-term move today, yesterday, as you're listening to this, to maximize whatever window they have with Giannis. I don't think they have a championship roster right now, but they're a competitive roster, and they're certainly more competitive after this move than they would have been without it in the immediate term, in the 25-26 season. There's a world where they were really incentivized to trade for their picks back. Because they're just a mess and they want their control of their future assets. And the Blazers controlling their future assets, actually, I think after this trade becomes more valuable because of, while the Bucks have a appetite to go for it, it's not forever. And this is like the latest time of like trying to stretch the timeline as far as they can. And I will say, even by stretching the timeline, where I do think they made some savvy moves. I think if they were going to keep Giannis, I think they did about as well as you can expect by keeping Giannis, like under that parameters. But like there is a dark back half of the mountain for the Bucks, and the Blazers could potentially take advantage of it. That is going to do it for today's show. Tell your friends about the podcast. Tell them they can get it wherever they listen to podcasts or on YouTube, and then come back for tomorrow's show. So what we do 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.